Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. This is your friendly neighborhood Oxhorn, and welcome to Oberland Station Revisited. This is my second time building this settlement. The first time was a while ago, and I've learned a few tricks since then, and I wanted to implement them in this new build. I made ample use of the boxcars that came with Contraptions Workshop because, as you can see, this settlement is on the train tracks, right? And so I figure, just like there are some abandoned boxcars way up the road and then over by the bridge by Grey Garden, there will likely be boxcars around here that the settlers can refit for their own use. I had a lot of fun putting this together, and I can't wait to show it to you. Now, you'll notice that I only have two shops, one little bar over here and one little clothing station over there. And this is a departure from what I normally do. I normally have like 11, 12, 13 different shops. And the reason for that is because I've changed the philosophy behind my settlement builds. I'm no longer trying to optimize for happiness. I've kind of gotten past that. I've figured it all out. I don't really need to worry about happiness anymore. So now my primary motivation is making the settlement look lived in. So over here, I've got a very tiny little marketplace. I figure that people from all over the wasteland will be walking around, and they'll come to Oberland Station because they hear tales of the settlement's wonderful clothing options and the fantastic food that the settlement produces. So I've got one tiny bar over here, and back here I've got all sorts of food. There's plenty of room for the settler to come back here and man the station. As you notice, I am not using the largest bar because I actually like the design of this one. It's smaller, it fits in this space better, it doesn't have those huge wings, and the same with this clothing shop. I decided to use a medium-sized one just because I wanted some diversity in the way that this looks. I've got a shelf over here. This is Dinosaurs shelving mod, and I decorated it up with a bunch of foodstuffs. These are pre-made decorations. I just had to snap them in there. It made things really easy. And from another mod, I think it's Miss May's Craftables mod, is this wonderful filled refrigerator filled with all sorts of goodies. And then I've got some wine bottles and beers on this shelf over here with some Nuka-Cola because, hey, it's a food and beverage shop. Over here, I've got my clothing shop, and the settler has all his or her wares out on display. We've got a rack filled with armor and clothing and hats and a duffel bag down there, and then here's the main display. This looks like something you'd see out of Fallon's basement. You know, all these wonderful clothing items put on display. I do a review of this mod, which I believe I'm publishing later this week, but here's a preview of what it'll look like. I even have a display case with all sorts of accessories and odds and ends. So right on top of the tracks, I built this tiny little platform with a tiny little shop, and I put some more time and attention into it because, you know, one of my main regrets of my last settlement build was I just put all my shops down, made sure that they were assigned, and then walked away. This time I wanted to actually make them look like used functional shops. Now on to the rest of the settlement. This settlement is tiny. It's a tiny little settlement, and so that brought with it some difficulties. But you know what? I actually really enjoy it when I have tiny little settlements that force me to do things that I otherwise wouldn't do. It allows me to be creative that way. So let's talk about the rest of the track. So the railroad track goes right through the settlement, and of course on top of that you're going to find rail cars. So I decided to put these 3 rail cars down and fill them with all sorts of personal effects. I've got some beds in here, and I have a mod installed that retexturizes the bed so it doesn't have that horrible back sweat stain that we're all used to. I have some nice unique carpets down here. I have all of the mods listed in the document that's linked in the description of this video if you're interested, so you can find them all there. And then I've got lived-in little doodads here and there. Here's a nice little table for the settler to sit down and eat her snacks. I've got food set out there. On up here, here's the second one. Each one has its own decorations, but they house the same number of people, 2, 4, 6. So 6 housed in each of these little box cars. And I achieved that by snapping one of these little end caps onto the back door here. So you see that each of these has 2 doors, one on one side, one on the other. This side is just the primary door, and then on this end I've got a little end cap that's serving as another room in the house. Down on here is the final box car that's on the track, and it likewise is decorated up with unique decorations. On the outside here, I've got 2 other little lounging stations, one for tea time and one for smoke time, so the settlers can enjoy themselves. Now, as I announced in a previous video, I'm going to try to make better use of my artillery cannons, because I want the Minutemen to have full reach of the entire map. So if I have one of these at every single settlement, I figure I can achieve that. So I built this platform, which I showed off in another video, and on top of it I placed an artillery cannon and assigned a settler to it, whom I dressed up in a Minuteman costume. Coming around the back, and you're going to find the first of my defense turrets. So let me zoom on up so that you can get the full view of it here. I used the scaffolding that came with Contraptions Workshop, and I plopped 6 different turrets down, 2 missile turrets and 2 heavy laser turrets and 2 spotlights. I found that one of the best ways to make this nice and compact is to use the long and tall scaffolding for the bottom, just to elevate it, and then use the shorter scaffolding for the top, just so that all of the units are nice and compact. And then you'll notice that one of the spawn points for enemies, let's pick that up, is right down here. And wow, there's lots of guns. You can see all of the different guns down here from where I've been attacked. And you do want to pick them up if you find them laying around, because if you don't, it'll cause save bloat. It'll bloat the size of your save file, and eventually, over time, it could corrupt it. So you want to make sure that you pick up all of the loose weapons you can and store them in your workshop. If you store them in your settler workshop, then settlers will actually pilfer the workshop of those weapons during attacks and defend themselves. Let's move on over to the station tower. I decided to use the outside here as sort of a workshop / utility area. I've got water purifiers right down here. These came with Wasteland Workshop. They generate 3 water each, so that brings me to 30. Over here I have my terminal where I use my settlement management software, and there, of course, is my fusion generator, which came with Wasteland Workshop. I have a nice rack set out here filled with all sorts of scrap and wonderful doodads, a lamp to light it at night, and of course there is the workbench. Now on the wall here you're going to notice a lot of plumbing pipes, and this comes from a mod that I introduced in my Grey Garden settlement. Each of these produces 3 water, so I'm able to, 2 water, so I'm able to hit my 36 water requirement by placing these down. Showing you my stats right there, I've got 36 people, so I'm going to need 36 water. And it was a challenge fitting all 36 people in this settlement. Part of me regrets having such a large settlement, having so many settlers in some of these smaller settlements, because it just makes things so much more complicated, and I have to use up so much more room to house them that I could use for other needs. But down the hill here, I built some outhouses. I typically build big sprawling bathrooms in my settlements, but since there was no room here, I built some outhouses, and settlers do use them. That's not from a mod, that's just the vanilla game, well, the Far Harbor DLC game, so, well, I guess you can say that the game that Bethesda programmed settlers to poop. Well, because that's what they're doing. On the inside, I just decorated them up with some of these lamps that came with Far Harbor, and I figure this is going to be their main rest area. And I built it downhill, of course, because I originally had it way up the hill here, but then I started to think, well, you know, gravity pulls water and all sorts of stuff downhill. Yeah, I don't want a big stream to erupt in the middle of the settlement. So I placed the outhouses downhill, and they can do their thing down here. Oh, just lounging around, just drinking. All right, let's give her some privacy. That's just creepy. Sorry, just now realizing how creepy that was. Anyway, there you go. So I've got the bathrooms down the hill, so that there's no horrible runoff into the middle of the settlement. So there we go. Down here underneath the stairs, I decided to create a little bit of a laundry area. Here's a laundry soak tub that came with a laundry mod and a dishwashing sink, which I'm just using as a laundry sink. There wasn't enough room for me to build a dedicated laundry facility like I typically do, so I placed it under here, and I figured that's where they can launder their clothes. Now coming up here, instead of turning it into beds, I turned it into a shower facility, hence the plumbing necessary on this building. So I've got all of these shower stalls up here that came with the Build Your Own Pool mod, and you'll notice that red tile that was on the floor, that's actually a relaxation marker that came with the Build Your Own Pool mod, and what it does is it attracts settlers at the beginning and the end of the day, similar to how bars do in your settlements. That way settlers will actually come on up here and use the showers, and yes, they do use them. They use them, and you can use them too. Now, in the middle of the settlement, you're going to see this huge turret tower. And I showed this off in a dedicated video where I walked through the process of making it. And the reason I have this in the middle of the settlement is because this settlement has attack spawn points right in the middle of the settlement, right here, incidentally. And it's, yes, I do realize that there's a mod that you can use to push spawn points outside of the settlement. But for reasons that I will cover in another video that I'm planning on shooting here soon, I don't want to move these spawn points because I feel it's unnecessary, because the way that the settlement attack system works is that enemies are going to find their way into the middle of your settlement no matter what you do. Even if you push the spawn markers outside of the settlement boundaries, and even if you build a wall around your settlement. And the reason for that is because enemies... the game will fast forward enemies into your settlement if you take a long time to respond to a distress call. And there are a bunch of other reasons, but I'll be getting that a little bit later, into that in another video. So I have this elevated concrete platform here filled with 4 heavy laser turrets and 4 Mark III machine gun turrets with some spotlights that came with the Automatron DLC. That's going to give me 360-degree coverage of the interior of the settlement, and then the exterior of the settlement is well guarded with these elevated defense structures. I have one right here because the other spawn point is right out here. There's one underground, deep underground over there, and then there's another one over here. Oh, and all sorts of weapons. I haven't done a good job of cleaning them up. Oh, and a minigun of all things. All right. So I'm cleaning up the weapons, but you know, this is an indication that the spawn point markers are accurate because you're seeing the leftovers of all of the different enemies that have come through and attacked. So this is my tower over here built with scaffolding to defend the exterior borders of the settlement, and then I have this 360-degree elevated tower to defend the interior. And you notice that I do have them staggered so that every angle is covered, either by machine gun turrets or these laser turrets. So I've got a doghouse nicely tucked under here, and I finally installed the Place Everywhere mod. Many of you have been commenting and saying, Oxhorn, why do you use the precise movement and rotation mod? That one is so much more complicated to use. Use the Place Anywhere mod. And so I finally did. I installed it, and you're right, it is amazing. I still really like the precise movement and rotation tool. I use them both in combination with each other, and it really helps out. Down here, I have a little cooking area. This fire pit came with the settlement, and what I did is I put down a lit fire from Wasteland Workshop, and I pushed it down with the precise movement and rotation tool just to make sure that the fire looks like it was lit. I placed down this cooking station. There's not enough room for a kitchen in this settlement. It's so compact. So I figured the settlers are going to come out here and roast their food on an open fire. They can sit down in these lovely chairs, which come from another mod that I'm going to be reviewing in an upcoming video. I just love the way these chairs look. They look like they're scrap. They're built from scrap. They're just kind of scrounged together with old tires and cinder blocks. I just love the way they look. So I'm going to do a video review dedicated to those in an upcoming video. There's a ladder that comes right on up to the shop area so that the shopkeepers have a way out. And then I, of course, put these boundaries all along the outside. By the way, many of you comment on my videos, what mod do I use for the sign? And then you tell me that you can't find it in my mod list. But it's there. This sign comes from the Gruffy D's Signs of the Times mod. And I do link to it in the document linked in my description. So please go there if you want to link to it. If you can't find it, it is there. I know it's there. But if you can't find it, just Google Gruffy D's Signs of the Time mod, and you will find a link to it on the Nexus. That brings us to the farm. So as you can see, the farmland has a unique texture on it that looks like a farm, so that's obviously where Bethesda wants us to build our farm. And I liked it, so I built my carrot farm here. I'm using carrots because they're nice and short, which means that I have access to the settlers. I can always walk up to a settler and initiate trade without having to loot the plant first. You'll notice that I have children farming, and I'm using a new mod called Orphans of the Commonwealth, which allows child settlers to spawn at your settlements, and they work just like regular settlers. You can assign them to a variety of tasks, but since Bethesda didn't code animations for children for things like store shops or scavenging, It's best if you use the children for farming, because Bethesda did code an animation for farming. So all my kids are assigned to farming, but you know what? It's good to work. It's good to learn hard work at a young age, I say. but this is not slave labor. This is not child labor. We are the Minutemen, and we treat all of our citizens right. Whether they be ghoul or synth or child, everyone has a home and a Minuteman settlement. So there's my little farm. So then let's talk about the bulk of the housing situation. I built this contraption. Let's see if I can get up high so that I can show you the profile or the overtop view. I had a lot of fun putting this together. It was tricky to get it supported on all of this scaffolding, but I did finally manage to get it. It's going to take a lot of trial and error if you want to duplicate the what I have here. But I have these orange boxcars for all lengthwise, and then I have blue boxcars for all horizontal pieces, just to kind of make it look like it has some sort of organization behind it. And it has room for all my settlers. So here's the ladder that came with the workshop DLC. And I'll give you the grand tour. Looks like the settlers just woke up, so they're kind of crowded around in here. And I do find that they have a hard time getting in and out, which is why they open up these back doors. I had all these back doors closed, and there's no ladder. Whoop! Oh, there's the Brahmin. Hi there, Brahmin. Enjoying your feed? That's good. I have no ladders coming out the back here because I wanted the settlers to come in and out of this entrance. But when you have 36 settlers in one settlement, you know, they're going to get crowded. So you might want to open up other doors for them. Anyways, so I've got a unique living area for each settler. They all have their own beds. They each have nice art on the walls. And I don't have tables set out with unique personal effects because that was just a lot of room and I already had so much set down. So instead what I put down is all of these little side areas. Lounge areas like this couch and a table with some chess, and here's a table with some power noodles or whatever these are called, the noodle bowls, so they can sit down and eat their noodles. I've got some unique rugs down here from a rug mod that I had installed, and every single settler has his or her own unique place to live. Here's a nice little smoking station. They do have a hard time exiting it, but you know, I figure I'll open it up. After I shoot the video, I'll open it up. And here's another wonderful couch that comes with a mod that I'm going to be reviewing in an upcoming video that looks like it's been hacked together with a bunch of bits and pieces. So I'm really proud about that. This is the very tiny kitchen area. It's really small, and I just didn't have room to do a full-fledged kitchen. So I figured they're going to cook their food out on the spit, and then in here they can store their cutlery, and they can chop their vegetables, and they can sort of just prepare their food on the inside. Now for eating food, again, I don't have a lot of room for a big formal dining room because it's such a small settlement, and that's one of the reasons why I have so many seating areas tucked away in all the nooks and crannies of this little boxcar complex. So I figure they can sit down and eat their food and, you know, listen to the sound of the wind blowing through the trees or whatever it is settlers do after the apocalypse. Now over here, these are unique beds for the kids. Children don't sleep in beds designed for adults. It just doesn't work with their animations or their meshes. So the mod author for Orphans of the Commonwealth created these unique child beds that are perfectly suited for kids. And so I put two down here. Each of them will put two kids to bed. So I put the boys in this bed and I put the girls in this bed with the pink rug. And then I gave them this really cool little toy for them to play with. It's basically a race car track, which I put in the boys' room. And I'll be reviewing that mod in an upcoming video as well. All of the mods that I'm reviewing are already linked in the description. I just don't have time to talk about them all right now. So this is the housing complex, and it's fully lit from the inside. I've got a radiator over here so that it has warmth. And every settler has a bed. And they've got plenty of lounging areas and art on the walls. And hey, I figure, you know what, if the Minutemen are going to rebuild the Commonwealth, they're going to pay attention to things like luxury and art. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is my Oberland station revisited. Not quite as sprawling and magnificent as some of my larger settlements like Sanctuary and Grey Garden, but for using the space that you're given with the settlement, I think that I came up with something unique and special. But I'm eager to hear what you all think in the comments below. So please let me know what your thoughts are. Leave a comment, and if you liked this video, if you want to see more of my settlement builds, if you want me to revisit some of my old settlement builds, tell me which settlement you want me to revisit in the comments below, and please subscribe for more content like this. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. I have a lot of videos already uploaded and scheduled to publish this week. I'm going to be reviewing lots of mods. I've got a bunch of great new tools and tips and tricks for you, so stay tuned for that, and thank you all so very much for watching.